Welcome to part 2 of Apex Regions, Forms. After I've specified information about my primary key, I can select which columns are going to show up on my form. If you'll notice, Movie ID isn't even an option. Oracle Application Express is smart enough to know that a primary key inside my table is not something an end user should have any access to. So it's not even presented as an option here on the columns page. Later on, I can go through and limit the information that I want to see on the page. If I specify that I don't want to see a specific column on this page of the wizard, it'll never be available to me inside of this particular page in my application. It's always a good idea to specify a little too much information on this page as opposed to not enough information. I may never want the ability for end users to see notes, but I can always go inside the logic of my application and suppress the displaying of that field if I want to. If I don't select it here, it'll never be available to me inside of this particular page of the application. Since this is a pretty simple application, I'm going to leave all of the columns that make up this table available to me inside this Application Express page. The similar rule of thumb that we've specified with columns also goes with buttons. If I were to suppress, let's say, the delete button here in the wizard, it'll never be available to me inside of my application. There may be some circumstances where I don't want users to have the ability to delete a record. If that's true all of the time, I can certainly say never show the delete button and continue on with the wizard. But if there are circumstances where I might want to see the button and other circumstances where I don't want to see the button, it's a good idea to leave this as yes for now. We can always go back later on and add logic to this particular form to conditionally suppress the viewing of the delete button. The branching page of the wizard makes us specify where we're going to branch after the page is submitted or when the cancel button is pressed. And you can see both of these are mandatory fields. In this example, I'm just going to go back to the page that we're working on. As is true with just about all of the wizards inside of Apex, there's a confirmation screen at the end to make sure that we have all of the information entered correctly. Once I click the Create button, Oracle is going to generate a lot of PL SQL code behind the scenes that reflect the answers to all of the questions that we've answered so far in the wizard. The really cool thing about Application Express is, number one, it's going to do this incredibly quickly, and number two, all of the plumbing code that I mentioned earlier will be handled for us automatically. So I'm going to click the Create button there, and you can see in real time, Oracle was able to generate all of that code, store it in the database in an incredibly short period of time. We can then run the page, and we have a fully functional web page based on our movies table inside of our database. This is not a production quality form. We're going to have to go in and tweak some of the information that we see on the form before it's even close to being a production quality application. But it's important to note that this is a truly functional web form that interacts with our Oracle database. So I can go through and enter information about movies that I've seen recently. One thing to note is that any constraints that are built on this particular table are not necessarily reflected inside of your Oracle application. Some of them are. You'll notice that we have not null fields on title and category. Oracle Application Express was smart enough to realize that those were mandatory fields. So you can see it gives a visual clue to the end user by placing an asterisk next to title and category. But you'll also notice that we have a check constraint for category. It has to be one of these 6 values. Application Express is not smart enough to automatically limit the information there. So that's one of the things that we're going to go through and create what's called a list of values. A list of values will limit what the end user can enter into a particular field. There's a check constraint on rating saying that it has to be between 0 and 10. We're going to do the same thing for rating, where we create a list of values that limits the type of information that an end user can enter. So even if an end user is aware of these different categories, it's real easy to input information that's either misspelled or just slightly different. You'll notice that all of the categories are in capital letters. So if I want to go through and enter a record, I can enter something like Frozen, and I might enter kids like that. That's a perfectly valid value. The Oracle database is expecting kids to be in all capital letters. So even if I go through and specify different values here and try to enter this record, as soon as I click on Create, I get this error message on my page. As a database administrator or database designer, it's pretty obvious what problem happened here. For an end user, they're not going to understand this error message. So one of the things that we're going to have to do to make this closer to a production quality form is make it easier for the end users to enter data. Since we already have a predefined list of what we expect inside of our database, it's real easy to go into our Application Express application and make those changes.